Hello everyone, my name is Tom and I'd like to welcome you to ADO's December webinar. And as we're in the midst of cold and flu season, we put together this presentation on the importance of flu shots. Today's speaker is Clinical Assistant Professor from Georgetown University and ADO's Medical Director, Dr. Howard Zahalsky. Welcome, Dr. Zahalsky, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Tom. So today we're going to talk a lot about flu shots, why you should get them and how they work, and what they do and what they cannot do. So let's start with just talking about what a flu shot is designed to do. And a flu shot is designed to prevent the illness influenza. Influenza is not the common cold. Influenza is a specific disease that is generally much more serious than a sniffling, runny nose, little bit of a cough, cold. It usually, in most parts of the country, peaks between January and March, and in order to prevent it, the vaccine has to be given usually about 6 weeks before you get exposed in order for it to have maximal effect. So it's recommended that you get the flu vaccine in the fall, the September to October time period, so that it will be at its maximal effect in the winter months of January through March. In some people, the immunity from a specific flu shot can last as long as years. In some people, it only lasts for several months. So on one hand, it's good not to get the flu shot too early in case you're someone whose immunity doesn't hang on that long. So getting it in July or August, when sometimes the flu shot first comes out, is not always the best idea. Again, getting it in the September-October timeframe is generally considered optimal. But in some people, immunity from one flu shot can last for years for that strain of flu. And remember, I said that strain of flu because we're going to be talking a lot about the different strains of flu and why one flu shot cannot protect you against all different types of flu, which is why it's important to get the flu shot every year. So let's talk about what the flu or influenza actually is, and we'll go on to the next slide. So as I said, a flu is different than a cold. A cold is usually caused by either rhinovirus or adenovirus, or even there's a virus called parainfluenza virus, none of which are influenza virus. These viruses usually make you stuffed up, they can cause a sore throat, make you hoarse, but they are not usually nearly as serious as actual influenza is. I hear a lot of patients who tell me, well, I got the flu shot and I still got the flu anyway. No, pretty much everybody will get at least 1 or 2 colds over the winter months. Why is the winter so popular for these? Well, it's not that the virus likes the cold weather better. In fact, the virus likes the cold weather less. What the virus does like is everybody inside, touching each other, kissing each other over the holidays, being in close quarters because they're afraid to go outside because it's too cold, and it makes it very easy for the virus to spread. Some strains of influenza can even be fatal. Again, much more serious than your typical run-of-the-mill cold. They can get into your lungs and cause a viral pneumonia. You can get short of breath and have trouble breathing, and can, in some cases, have deadly consequences, which is why I push for people to get the flu shot so hard. Once you have already gotten the flu, from the time that the symptoms first start, if you don't get treatment within 48 hours, there is no specific treatment that works well for influenza. Within the first 48 hours of influenza, after symptoms start, there are medicines such as Tamiflu, which can be started, which will not cure the flu, but will oftentimes minimize symptoms and shorten the course. But because people don't realize that they have the flu usually in the first 48 hours, oftentimes they'll think they're just having a cold until things get really serious and don't get to the doctor in the first 48 hours after their symptoms start. Oftentimes the flu is essentially untreatable medically once you have actually gotten it. So prevention is generally considered much more important for influenza than treatment. So the hallmark of influenza is fever. Sometimes with run-of-the-mill colds, adenovirus, let's say, you can get a temperature of up to 101, maybe even 101.5. It can last for a day or so, and then usually comes down on its own. With the flu, you get a fever that can be over 101 for 8 days. It's a long-lasting, very serious, very febrile, feverish disease. And as you can see, it is generally much more serious than your typical run-of-the-mill upper respiratory tract infection, which again, just is further evidence that prevention is very, very important. So we are going to talk more about the flu shot now. How do we start to make the flu shot? How do we know what to put in the flu shot? Well, there are many, many different strains of the flu, and we're going to talk more about that as we go on. But only 1 or 2 are usually prevalent in any specific year. And the flu shot itself can usually only protect you against 3 or 4 at most of the most serious strains of the flu, despite there being hundreds and hundreds of potential flu strains out there. So the World Health Organization actually has a surveillance program. They watch to see where this year's flu starts and then tries to build the flu shot around the flu that is believed to will be prevalent. Sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes the flu that they think is going to be the most prevalent turns out not to be the most prevalent. But the World Health Organization has dozens of centers around the world that watch for flu, and when they see a center of flu, influenza breaking out somewhere, they gather samples of the virus and send it to commercial labs to start building the flu shot. Where does the flu tend to start? Well, the flu, as I said, it actually likes warm weather. So it tends to start particularly in Central America and Southeast Asia. We often find which flu is going to be prevalent in the United States, particularly, surprisingly, by Southeast Asia more than Central America. So when an outbreak is seen in Southeast Asia, which is both warm and in some places has sanitation issues, making it ripe for spread of the flu, the World Health Organization will send the companies that produce the flu shot samples of the virus, and they will begin to work on the flu shot. So now once we have these samples of viruses and know which strains of viruses that we need to work on, how do we turn that into the flu shot? And before we go into that, I have to explain a little bit about how the flu shot works and to recognize which strain of the virus we are fighting this year. And let's go on to the next slide. So I want you to think for a second that you are your body's immune system. You are trying to protect yourself from invaders. Anything that you recognize as self, as your normal stuff that's supposed to be in your body, you don't perceive as a threat. You perceive it as a nice field of relaxing green grass. If you're the immune system looking out over this beautiful field of grass, you don't see any weeds whatsoever. You believe that it is neatly trimmed and calm, and you have nothing to do but sit back in your rocking chair and drink your lemonade on your front porch and admire your acreage. But sometimes there are invaders to your beautiful field of green grass. Oh no, a weed, in this case, a dandelion. Now your immune system wants to attack that. You don't want to let that spread. Then next week you'll be having dandelions throughout the field. This is an invader. So you want to stop those dandelions, those weeds from spreading. What do? You find your 6-year-old kid, because the immune system delegates and sends out antibodies. And antibodies aren't very complicated. They're rather simplistic, kind of like a 6-year-old kid. And you tell your kid, go pick that weed. And the kid says, well, what's a weed? And you say, see that yellow flower over there? That's a weed. And that kid is going to remember that a yellow flower that looks like that is a weed that needs to be picked. So the next day, you're sitting in your rocking chair, looking out over your beautiful grass field, and you see this. And you call over your 6-year-old again, and you say, go pick the weed. And the kid goes out looking for the weed. And they come back and they say, I didn't see any weeds. There aren't any weeds. And you say, what's that over there? You say, the kid says, that doesn't look like a weed. That's not a yellow flower. Because antibodies are just like that 6-year-old. they recognize one type of weed. They only recognize dandelions, and to make it even more complicated, they only recognize yellow dandelions. If that dandelion had been blue or red the next day, I know there are no blue or red dandelions, but just play with me and pretend that there are, the kids still would have come back and said, nope, didn't find any yellow dandelions. So this weed, which is shaped a little different, not going to be recognized. Crabgrass looks completely different, not going to be recognized. The kid is not going to pick any of those weeds, only the yellow dandelions that he was initially taught to pick. So, viruses like influenza have trademarks on them. The flowers that a weed has, the virus particles have similar flashing lights on them, let's say, that are the immune system's equivalent of bright flowers. These are called proteins. Proteins are chemicals that are on the outside of viruses that your body uses to recognize them, and your normal cells to say whether they are real or invaders. Well, the proteins that are recognized as invaders are these two proteins. No, you don't have to learn how to spell them. They are called hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. Your body doesn't naturally have hemagglutinin proteins and neuraminidase proteins. Those are invaders. But to make matters more complicated, there are many different types of hemagglutinin, and there are many different types of neuraminidase. Now, each strain of influenza has one type of hemagglutinin and one type of neuraminidase. So let's just take the hemagglutinin. If there's more than one type of hemagglutinin, it's kind of like there being more than one color of dandelion. And your immune system will only recognize one at a time. So if you're told to look out for purple dandelions, you will only fight purple dandelions. And then if a red dandelion comes along, you won't attack the red dandelion. There are 15 types of hemagglutinins and 9 types of neuraminidase, which essentially means there's 15 different colors of hemagglutinin and 9 different colors of neuraminidase. We name the flu strains based on which neuraminidase and which hemagglutinin they have. So you've probably heard of a flu named the H1N1 flu. That was the serious bird flu that was around a few years ago. You can also have H3N2 or even H12N8. Because of this, there are many, many hundreds of combinations of hemagglutinin and neuraminidase. And if your body has been told by the flu shot to recognize H1N1 and H2N4, but then an H3N5 comes along, your body's not going to recognize it. This is why we have to look out for which flu strain, the H3N2, might be prevalent in any specific year, and make flu vaccines to alert your body specifically for that strain. Now remember, flu shots don't last forever. So we can't just go around vaccinating people against every combination of the flu and hoping that they're okay for life. Because there are so many strains and because the immunity from the flu shot doesn't last forever, we have to know which flu strains are around that year and specifically vaccinate for those colored dandelions. So we've figured out which strain is popular this year. How do we turn that into the flu shot? And here you have a picture of eggs. Many of you may have heard that flu shots are grown in eggs, which to some degree is true. Once the drug companies, because it's actually commercial drug companies that generally produce the flu shot, obtain the virus from the World Health Organization, they stick the virus into eggs, which it turns out are really good places for growing viruses. And they grow more and more and more of the viruses in the safety of an egg, in the safety of a lab, so that they can have much more virus particles because they need those virus particles to turn into flu shots. If the flu doesn't grow very well in eggs that year, then there's a shortage of flu shots, and we've had that problem with certain strains of the flu vaccine before. Once we've grown a lot of flu particles in a lot of eggs, the scientists take the flu virus out of the eggs and grind them up into little pieces. Each piece will have some hemagglutinin on it, and each piece will have some neuraminidase on it. but there won't be any solid pieces of flu left. Because of this, one of the truisms I want you to take away from this talk is you can't get the flu from a flu shot. Why? Because there's no actual intact flu left in the flu shot. They've broken it into little pieces so your body can recognize just petals of the dandelion. It's as if you are injecting a petal of a dandelion into your body as opposed to the whole dandelion, and your body will learn to recognize individual petals and doesn't need to recognize the dandelion as a whole. Now, because we grow them in eggs, there's always a little bit of egg protein that gets in too. And if you're someone who's allergic to eggs, it can make it difficult to get the flu shot because you can have an allergic reaction to the flu shot if you are allergic to eggs. So there are a couple of alternatives. There is a type of flu vaccine called Flucelvax, which is grown in mammalian cells instead of eggs. That's harder to do, and because of this, there isn't as much of the Flucelvax available, and it tends to be more expensive and only available in certain specific health centers. There is also another vaccine called Flublok, where instead of growing the influenza virus, the company literally creates the proteins, the neuraminidase and the hemagglutinin, chemically, so that they were never part of a flu virus. This is a harder process as well, but again, does not usually involve eggs. As a result, it is again safe for people who have egg allergies, but is again more expensive and less readily available. The two most common vaccines that are generally available in your typical CVS or Walgreens or drugstore are Fluvarin and Fluzone, which are the ones that grow their viruses in eggs and then grind it up. There is one other alternative for people who don't want to get the flu shot. Why would you not want to get the flu shot? There are some people who just have needle phobias, and there are again some years that it is difficult to get the flu shot for one reason or another. And this we will see on the next slide. This is FluMist. It's an intranasal injection of flu vaccine. It is still based on flu grown in eggs. So if you get the virus and you grow it in the eggs, instead of breaking it into microscopic little pieces and then injecting it, they take the flu virus and they paralyze it. I don't understand the chemical way that they paralyze it, but we paralyze the virus so that it can't actually hurt you. And then we inject it into your nose so your body learns kind of the normal way what this flu strain is. Because normally when you get the flu, you get it through your nose by breathing it in. The problem with the FluMist is that sometimes, very, very rarely, some of the paralyzed, which we call attenuated virus, becomes unparalyzed. And there is a small, small chance of giving someone the flu with FluMist. But some years when the Fluvarin and the Fluzones, the injections aren't available, this can be the only option for preventing the flu. People who have gotten FluMist need to stay away from people who are immunocompromised. If you don't have a strong immune system and you can't get the FluMist, and if people with the FluMist cough on you, it is possible for them to give you the paralyzed virus. Well, because your immune system isn't particularly strong, it can help the virus to become, quote unquote, unparalyzed, and it can cause flu in someone who has a weak immune system. So people with weak immune systems need to stay away from FluMist and even from people who recently got the FluMist. So that's the nuts and bolts of the flu shot, how it's made, why it works, why you need different shots each year, because each year there are different strains, and why it is important to get the flu shot. And with that, we'll go on to the next slide and tell you how Activ Doctors Online can help you protect yourself from the flu. Activ Doctors Online has 3 unique solutions to help you stay healthy. The first is our personal health records. We have an intelligent personal health record, which will do a lot of things. It will show your doctors whether you've gotten the flu shot, which strains you've gotten. It will also send you reminders when you're due for the flu shot. Hey, it's October. Time for you to be thinking about getting the flu shot through our health tracker. In that way, we can help you to stay healthy. Next, with our second medical opinions, if you have a serious medical problem, whether it be a serious case of the flu or anything else, we can give you a second medical opinion from one of our top specialists in infectious disease or many other areas of specialty in as quick as 48 hours so that you can get the help that you need quickly. Finally, our e-consultations. If you and your doctor are both members of Activ Doctors Online, we, through our platform, can enable video visits so that you can get in to see your doctor potentially quicker. Remember, if you think you have the flu, time can be the enemy because you need to get started on treatment within 48 hours for it to have any chance of being effective. Sometimes it might not be possible to physically get to your doctor in those 48 hours, and an e-consultation visit can be better for both you and your doctor. Number one, you won't infect everyone in the waiting room, and number two, they can attend to you and give you the treatment you need in the time required. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tom, who can tell you how to get started with Activ Doctors Online if you're interested in the things that we've talked about today.
Well, thank you, Dr. Zahalsky, for another great presentation. Here at Activ Doctors Online, our mission is to reinvent healthcare by providing user-friendly mobile health solutions that allow people all over the world to live healthier, safer, and more productive lives. We strive to educate, engage, and empower our members to take control of their health destiny to save time, money, and even lives. We hope you've enjoyed today's presentation, and we invite you to start a free 30-day trial over at activdoctorsonline.com and by clicking Get Started. For more information, to schedule a demo, or if you have any other questions about our service, please feel free to contact Activ Doctors Online using the information on screen. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next month for another informative health webinar.